A lot of people come to me regarding big questions surrounding purpose. And I'm like, oh, do you feel like you have a big purpose? They go, yeah. I go, wow, that sounds awful. One big purpose. That's a hell of a task. But when we can bring purpose down to play, which is in each moment, my purpose is to be here, to be on this podcast. And then my purpose after that is to eat the cheesecake that I brought.
Someone might be hearing this and be like, Niño, maybe you don't have enough responsibilities.
Who?
Think about the parent with all the kids.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that person that says, I don't have time to play, I have too many responsibilities?
Oh, jeez.
Welcome to the Whole Human Experience, your library for experiential wellness.
This is actually something I'm really genuinely curious about, is how you build following with people that follow you online. And I would say you're an influencer online. Maybe you do or don't identify with that. With the path of authenticity to where it's constantly changing. How do you not get caught in an identity whenever you're building following, when you're sharing content? How do you stay authentic?
I had the pleasure of talking with someone today who perhaps also finds themselves in that role of an influencer. And they said that they have opened themselves up to be wobbly, and that being wobbly allows you to flow. You're still in a center that you're kind of moving through, but that movement and that wobble also allows you to let go of things that aren't serving you in that movement. And I think a lot of it, if you want to do it with grace and integrity, comes down to a degree of humility, of being honest about where you are on your path. And I think honesty also means claiming of your power. Often at times in my life, I thought that honesty meant becoming a performance of humility, but actually that was disingenuous. I actually claiming, oh, I have developed skills, tools, discipline, and practices that have radically transformed my life, and I have demonstrably been able to do that not in my own life, but in the lives of other people, and that I can say confidently. And yet, on my own personal journey, I am also navigating the tension between shame and expression, the disillusionment of old identities and new patterns emerging, and I'm on a journey of discovery. And I hope that in just the transparency about it, and then hopefully the reorientation of self towards yourself. Sure, I'm growing a following, but hopefully the core message is, I'm not your guru. I'm a mirror that might help remind you of the guru within you. And that, I think for me, that's been the personal way that I navigate that complexity, because fundamentally the growth of an identity often is that I'm starting to get certain. Oh, this is definitely who I am. This is definitely the way to move through the world. This is definitely the perspective to have.
Yeah.
And I think that the definite nature is often needs humbling time and time again.
So paradoxical to continue to evolve, grow, find wholeness, whatever it is for you, but not define yourself into a space. I love that you're a walking paradox. We were just talking about this. Like, to me, that's so interesting. This is my favorite people that can, what you did, get down an ecstatic dance, get super playful, super wobbly, maybe, but like get after it, and then after, like, have an intellectual discussion and go in deep presence.
It's like, I mean, I said it of you, and I really do mean it. You're a leader precisely because you give people permission around you to play. And when a man shows up in a physical prowess, which you do, you're very fit, you're tall, you're well spoken, articulate, you're doing great things in your life, and being an active community member while being radically engaged in play, you're actually, I think, unlocking the power within each of us. And I do think that, part of why I've chosen the name Niño for myself, or my brand is Los Niños, is I think there is something to be said, and something fundamental around the return to the child within. Paradox. When adults return to the children within themselves, they grow up. When adults deny, repress, and reject the children within themselves, well, then they unconsciously live through the wounds of the child, acting in ways that hurts not only themselves, but the world around them. But when people play and they can embrace the contradiction of dancing at the ecstatic dance and then engaging in an honest and authentic intellectual discussion or discourse, that's play. That is a beautiful expression of play.
Yeah. I really believe that play is maturity as well. Like, fan of this, that it's not a contradictory thing, that it is to be mature is to play.
Mm,
How do you define play though? Because people hear this and like, okay, you're talking about an active let go release. I get people that hire me as their play coach.
really.
And then like some people don't even know what that means. Like what does that mean? But I'm curious for you, how would you define what play is?
Mm. It takes me back, right? But like when I was a kid, when I used to play fundamentally every day, it was this understanding, perhaps implicit, that while I am clearly at school and I know the bell is going to ring and I know recess is going to be over, whatever, like I'm aware that there's some structure that I'm abiding by, that I can choose to make this space anything I want to project meaning onto.
Mm.
If me and Aiden Hunter, who's like my childhood best friend, we go, hey, want to play Army? All right, then we're deep in it, and suddenly the world is taking us, and I'm like, da da da, I've been shot. Be careful, and we're in play because we are choosing to give the world around us a new meaning, one that perhaps was not there to begin with. And I think that to see yourself as a playful being or as a creator is perhaps another interchangeable word is to recognize that we are mapping our meaning onto the world. There is a certain level of power and humility unto that. I am of the philosophy that the universe is inherently paradoxical, absurd, and without meaning. And yet, in that inherent nature, that means everything is meaningful, that anything that you choose to be meaningful. And that's been a huge point of work with the client work that I do, for instance. A lot of people come to me regarding big questions surrounding purpose. What's my purpose? What's that? I go, oh my goodness, you, and I'm like, oh, do you feel like you have a big purpose? They go, yeah. I go, wow, that sounds awful. Like one big purpose. That's a hell of a task. But when we can bring purpose down to play, which is in each moment, my purpose is to be here, to be on this podcast, to engage in an authentic and perhaps entertaining manner. And then after this, that was my purpose. And then my purpose after that is to eat the cheesecake that I brought, because really it's on my
It
mind.
was delicious.
It's delicious. Purpose and play also, like the power of a conscious creator to place meaning onto everything becomes the avenue to play with life. So that's kind of how I see it. It is the action that springs forth from the function within the mind to create meaning.
Someone might be hearing this and be like, Nino, maybe you don't have enough responsibilities.
Who?
Think about the parent with all the kids
Yeah.
and the things they have to do and take seriously.
Mm.
How do you respond to that person that says, I don't have time to play, I have too many responsibilities?
Oh, geez. Yeah. I think you said it well, that perhaps it's not a contradiction, that perhaps maturity in of itself is the playful state, that the very nature of rigidity is actually the biggest fool. Like that's actually to act like of quite an ignorant child. Because when you assume that you're actually taking quite an arrogant stance. And paradoxically, like the Zazen masters of Buddhism say, to arrive to each moment with a novice mind, with total humility unto or play, that's actually a deeper form of maturity that opens your mind from a lot of the cognitive load to open yourself to learn, to be more spontaneous. And ultimately, like if you are someone who's busy, right, from a pragmatic level, if you're carrying that load in the mind consciously at all times, you're actually inhibiting your ability to think, your cognitive function. You're probably adding to the emotional dysregulation, which isn't allowing you to be as regulated amongst the responsibilities that you have. So even from a functional perspective, engaging in a degree of play or having a playful or even novice stance onto responsibility is beneficial. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have structure or order. In fact, I'm quite autistic and I love structure and discipline and order or devotion, as I like to call it now.
Yes.
It just means like have fun with it. Like whatever that means to each of us, like maybe that you're definitely going to the gym and you have these like non-negotiables, but you can play around with how you do those things. Or or today, maybe you don't always know exactly what you're going to do at the gym, but you play around with it. Or you always go to a different Instagram guy that you really like and you do different workouts. Something as simple as that is playful. Yeah. I'm not rigid about it. I'm being playful with the manner in which I approach my discipline.
Love that. You might have dissolved purpose for a lot of people already, a couple minutes into this podcast, which is crazy. But do you feel then, when I hear this, I'm unsure. Do you have a mission or a North Star, or is that ever changing?
Yeah.
And currently you do, but it's different than it was a week ago. Or do you have an ultimate this is what I'm doing in this life. This is what I feel my
Mm.
calling is, or no.
Well, this is going to be the first example of my hypocrisy and my complete contradictory nature. In some ways, the more that I arrive presently and I follow my genuine desires, what I'm really interested in, what lights me up, I find that there is an emergent overall pattern. And it's like, oh wow, my grand purpose does seem to be to shine in my flawed imperfection with my deep passion for spiritual philosophy and devotional living to the soul. And in being this wonderfully flawed human being that once used to think I had to be perfect to lead, in my humanness, in my authentic rawness, in the imperfection and wretchedness that I am the permission, and I'm serving as the permission for so many people to live more wholehearted, authentic lives. And it's like, wow, that's a big thing, eh? But I rarely ever fucking approach my life like that. Like that's a crazy. I think you gotta be very mindful not to wake up with that every day,
Yeah.
because then at some point you risk. I would risk that my authenticity becomes a performance of itself, a
For
caricature of itself
others.
for other
I'm
people.
authentic for other people, not for myself. So then you're not authentic.
And then
Yes.
exactly, and then maybe my authenticity just becomes people pleasing.
Yes.
So actually, I love that. My friends the other day, that of which who had just been at a one of my retreats, and admittedly, maybe we weren't as close before, and they're getting to see me in a more social environment, and we're goofing off. We just taken some acid, and we're at this restaurant, and I'm eating this watermelon, and my friend she tries to like move my scarf that I didn't ask to be moved, and I kind of jokingly go, "What the fuck?" And everyone just starts laughing so hard, and they go like, "Oh, that's so funny because you're not like you don't." It seems somewhat out of character, and yet it was so wholehearted, authentic, and you. Because I'm like, yeah, I'm not trying to people please you. I was genuinely like, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing? Why are you touching me? Why are you moving my scarf out of the way? It was perfectly fine. But that sassy nature in me, that's part of me too. That's part of my authenticity. I am happy that I'm not so caught up in thinking like, oh well, they just paid money to be in one of my retreats, and I have to upkeep this idea of myself. I was like, no, there's no idea to upkeep. It's who I am, and if you don't like it, that's okay. We're not entitled to like everything. How do then I navigate from like a small purpose? I really like I saw this on Pinterest a couple years ago, and it really landed. It was just like some text that someone had written answering the question around purpose, and they answered that I find my purpose 15 times a day. In fact, earlier this morning when I went to the coffee shop and I noticed the barista, she was having a bad day. I looked at her name tag and I went, "Hey, Katie, it's pretty busy in here. Crazy day, huh?" And she smiled and she acknowledged that. And we had a little conversation. That was my purpose. And then as I was leaving, there was an old woman who was carrying bags and she couldn't get out. So I just held the door for her. That was my purpose. And then as I got home and I was wrapping up, my dog was waiting for me and he really wanted me to walk. So of course we went outside, and as I was walking him, that was my purpose. There's a level of humility in accepting purpose and mundanity that I think truly makes space for a purposeful life. And that's what we want. This is so Joe Dispenza-y, but everything that we want to manifest is an excuse for a feeling we want. Big purpose is an excuse for the feeling of purposeful. Oh, it's going to be really freaking hard to feel purposeful if your only purpose is this grand thing, which you might not always feel like you're fulfilling.
Yes.
But if purposeful living is just being present in everything, it's a lot easier.
I like that. These are things that increase love, right? Create loving reactions. They're service based. Those people appreciate. Thank you. I feel good. We feel good.
Yeah.
What if you trigger somebody?
Mm.
Is that purpose then? Because if you're in your truth, somebody gets triggered, angry, upset, based on what you just shared, separate from that, but maybe today you just didn't have those examples. Does triggering other people imply not on purpose, or can both exist?
Yeah, can we be in a state in which, let's say, we didn't act in accordance with what might make someone feel good,
Yes.
and is that still purposeful? I
Or
mean,
authentic, right?
right.
If you're in your authenticity, somebody gets upset, they're triggered.
We have to be very mindful in this discussion. When we talk about authenticity, it can become an excuse for for antisocial behavior.
Mhm.
Antisocial behavior just framed as behavior that is um, in conflict with social cohesion, with kindness, with ultimately ideals of a social fabric or of a healthy society. I say that just to preface, of course, authenticity and triggering people can be great. It can be great medicine. I often notice when, like, one of my best friends, Theo, his way of being can often trigger me
Mhm.
because he's so similar to me in so many ways
Mhm.
and how we see the world, but then he'll act different. And a trigger like that will come up for me, but I'm like, I get curious about it. I'm perhaps at a point now where I'm like, I know this is going to teach me something. What am I judging about myself that I'm seeing in him? I can use trigger. I know I can use a
Yeah,
trigger
that takes
consciously.
capacity
Right.
to use triggers.
So on the flip side, well, what about someone who's unconsciously being triggered? I'd like to think that I'd like to hope that on some level, unconscious triggers, when not done maliciously, when done out of a degree of integrity, albeit imperfectly as everything will be,
Mhm.
that it can still serve that ultimate function of helping the world. And I think that becoming the person who triggers people and becoming addicted to making people uncomfortable can become quite a poison, actually, that creates more division on Earth than it does bring harmony. I think that there's a creator and a friend I like, Panpsyche Davey, who's been making some great content, and recently he made a piece of video going, if you meet someone xenophobic, racist, whatever, is a hateful person, and you find yourself, you want to get them to not be that way, agree with them. Not agree with that thing that they may or may not be saying, but like get curious about them.
Mhm.
Ask them something like, oh, like, oh, you seem to be someone who really cares about family, hey? And they go, yeah, yeah, I do. And I go, I really care about family too.
Mhm.
And his approach then goes on to demonstrate like sometimes when we're curious first and we try to find common ground, as opposed to assuming that because this person, oh, I know that they would get triggered if I talk about this, and then needing to shove that in their face as if, oh, I'm helping. I think that's immature.
Mhm.
I think that there's a reason why I don't see any spiritual philosophy that I've ever encountered talk about doing that with distaste. And yet, there are spiritual masters within the Buddhist and Zen world specifically who do talk a lot about like kind of breaking people's egos. Socrates talked about it too through the Socratic dialogue. And there's wisdom, and I just don't think most people know how to do that. And that's, like 100% you can use triggers to help people grow.
Yes.
But I want to be very conscientious that, like, I think what most people imagine, oh, yeah, I trigger people. Yeah, that might not always be the best,
Mm.
but you can use triggers actively to help people grow.
Yeah. The
Ah.
path of seeking first to understand, then to be understood
Oh, yeah.
is
Oh, well said.
seems a more rounded path to connection.
I love what you just said. That
Yes.
seeking first to understand and understand, then to be understood. Yeah, that's it. Because if you're triggering someone like forcefully, there's a part of you that just is, see my truth,
Mhm.
motherfucker.
Mhm.
But if you're like trying to get curious about someone first, I think that'll ultimately open them up in far more inviting ways. Yeah.
Mm. And that is play, curiosity in itself.
It really is.
It's play. So you mentioned what you ran here in Costa Rica.
Yes.
Curious, we're in Costa Rica. Obviously, this is where the podcast goes down. And can you speak more to that? Because I'm curious about what you host. From what I know, this is the second space that you've hosted.
Yeah.
Why Costa Rica, and what are these containers about?
Mm. Yeah, this most recent retreat experience was at Protopia Community, um, a permaculture farm and workaway community for many people, and also retreat center located in the Alajuela province. So deep in the jungle of Costa Rica, about a 3.5 hour drive from San Jose, a 2.5 hour drive from Liberia Airport. And it's really in there. Aside from the Starlink satellite that keeps you somewhat connected, yeah, you really feel disconnected from the matrix, but you feel very connected to nature and her rhythms, and that's why I chose Costa Rica. Last year, I had the great pleasure of facilitating at Pepe Curto's retreat at Protopia Community,
Mhm.
and I fell in love with the rawness of the space. I fell in love with the people there. They are truly heart-centered hippies in all the best ways that I mean those words. People who truly do not care for the opinions of others placed upon them on how they choose to express themselves. And there's a freedom in that truly respect and admire. That's why I chose the place.
Mm.
And the experiences, I want to connect people with God. I've always wanted to connect people with God. Even when I was young, I was curious about how I could intellectually connect with God before I felt maybe a heartfelt connection, and how I could even steer conversations towards talking about the metaphysical principles of the universe. I create and curate these experiences in some ways for that, but without becoming a dogmatic or preachy space, but rather, can I create an immersive experience where people encounter different levels of discomfort through vulnerability, authentic relating, shadow work, using principles of different spiritual philosophies, but ultimately under the guiding ethos of Los Niños?
Mm.
We are all children of God. We are all humble unto a greater force. And I'm not here to tell you your truth, but I'm here to remind you that within each of us, there is a knowing, there is a silent whisper that will always speak to you and guide you and remind you of who you are, paradoxically,
Mhm.
in first letting go of that identity. So,
Mhm.
much like my coaching work, the experiences are a place where we shed identity, play with identity, explore how identity has kept us in different behavioral patterns.
Mhm.
My background's in psychology and counseling, but I have a deep practice of meditation over 10 years now, where that really fundamentally changed my relationship to mind, self, and other, or illusion of other. And these experiences, I try my best to, of course, in a 7-day or 6-day immersive experience, how can we blend these tools in to create an immersive, transformative peak experience that blends, temazcal, breathwork, meditation, yoga, hike to a waterfall, hard physical work with deep vulnerability, presence, stillness, freedom of expression, play, and ultimately to serve that ultimate goal of feeling like your humanity doesn't have to be a performance of itself.
Mm.
I deeply dislike and have an aversion to places, spaces, and people whose energy is a performance of itself, a caricature of itself. It's okay to be freaking cliche. I am so cliche. I'm wearing a mushrooms t-shirt, wearing tinted sunglasses, and I look like Juan Timberlake. I know. I know that I'm a cliche.
That's good.
It's okay.
Yeah.
But it's cliches are okay.
Mhm.
Caricaturizations of yourself because you are uncomfortable meeting your raw, wholehearted expression. I'm not about that. So my spaces are like, that's what I'm not for. And what I'm for is be the weirdest you can be.
As a facilitator,
Mhm.
how do you pull off authenticity
Uh-huh.
in yourself as a person,
Yeah.
and then the space of I'm the facilitator of the thing, so I have a role in this dynamic in different spaces? I know you facilitate many spaces, retreats one, I know you host many things, you're a coach for
Yep.
many, you support many.
Mhm.
So you go into a role, I
Yeah,
presume.
totally.
How do you hold authenticity, and when do you withhold it because there's time and space for that
Mm.
as somebody who's holding?
Yeah, greatly said, and perhaps I'd like to make the distinction here. When one can be authentic in a role, there are now just different frameworks for the behavior within that role, and the frameworks and limitations that arise do not negate authenticity. They just channel it with more structure.
Mhm.
For instance, I would to not talk about that for a moment, but I think that when I'm with my parents, I'm truly authentic, but I'm innately playing a role. They're my mom and dad.
Mhm.
There's a role being played. All that to say, in those spaces, I also just try to be really like that big, honest, transparent guy. Like when people come, I like my monologue. So welcome. This is the theme of the week. This is the Odyssey become undeniable. The Odyssey is a Greek great poem or story about Odysseus on the return home from the Trojan Wars, and this is what it was about. He technically got a 2-week journey, became a 10-week one, and he's anything but perfect. He's so flawed. Like all of you, you're all flawed, and I'm flawed too. And this week is about taking ownership for our story and our flaws and the beauty of the journey as we return home to ourselves. And reminding ourselves that our heroism in our personal lives doesn't rest upon ideas of perfection, but rather in embracing and integrating the raw imperfections of us. So in setting these tones in the transparent nature that that I lead, it sets the tone like, oh, okay, so I'm not gonna pretend to be perfect, and you guys don't have to either.
Mm.
And yet I also reiterate frames and structure often. When we walk into a workshop, guys, I'm going to ask that we maintain sacred silence out of respect, not just only for yourselves, but the integrity of every other person. Now, when we navigate into vulnerability, for some of us, we might be thinking of a breakup that was difficult. For someone else, that might be sexual abuse that they endured as a child. Out of respect for everyone having their own experience, we maintain that sacred silence when we're in this workshop. Are we all in agreement? Yes? Great. There's a certain level of, you have to communicate boundaries, you have to communicate frameworks, and that is authentically me.
Yes.
Totally.
Mhm.
Just as it's authentically me to when we're at lunch or dinner, make a stupid joke or say, "Oh, that was retarded," and be like, "Oh, that was I know people don't love that word, but like embrace. I'm raw. I'm messy. I'm messy too. I'm not gonna get everything right, and also take accountability in the process. I guess.
Mhm.
A big thing is at any of my retreats, I kind of go over the do's and the don'ts of the ethics here. One big thing is I talk about how we handle conflict or discomfort. At a Los Niños experience, I do not empower people. I do not encourage people to act like children, ironically, when it comes to conflict.
Mhm.
If you have an issue with someone, I encourage you first and foremost, before you talk to me, before you talk to anyone, see if you can talk to that person. Hey, can I talk to you for a second?
Mhm.
Earlier today you made a comment and maybe you didn't mean for it to land, but like I actually felt deeply offended by that because I've actually experienced and give that person an opportunity to step up to the occasion and go, whoa, that was not my intention to cause harm, but I'm really sorry that I caused harm because like that doesn't feel good for me either. I apologize and I'll be more conscientious. That's the kind of a space that I want to create. The last thing I want to fall into in creation is a repeating of dogmatic corporate structures where we now disempower the individuals to take accountability, but we create these overwatches. We really disempower trust when we don't encourage people to have uncomfortable conversations. So all to kind of wrap around, I try to create, embody, and hold true a structure of we're all adults here.
Mhm.
Please act like an adult. Please take accountability if you've hurt someone, including myself. Also, I encourage you to have difficult conversations. And of course, the opening is if you really need support, please, I'm available. And don't ever feel like I'm not someone you can't rely on. But to also be frank, of course, in any role, there's things I have to be mindful of. Like, for instance, if I'm tired, I'm at work. I doesn't. Well, I'm tired. I gotta take a nap. No, like absolutely not. Like, people are at this retreat. They've invested their time, their energy, and their money. They flew out here. I'm tired. Drink a coffee or try to sleep better the next night. Like,
Mhm.
there's certain ways in which you have to mitigate your authenticity because maybe it would have been way more authentic if I just took a nap midday.
Mhm.
Yeah, but that would have sucked for all the 6 people who were really hoping to talk to me and integrate some of the stuff that came up.
Yes. Makes sense.
Is this
You
fair?
are at a place, from my
Uh-huh.
perspective, of mastery when it comes to
Thank
facilitation,
you.
content creation, being you,
Yeah.
and being able to allow other people to witness you. It doesn't feel like it's for others, but with others.
Mm.
Many people are not there. And so people that are on the
You're right.
path, that are, newly facilitating, that are like, I'm kind of dabbling in the space. Like, I want to go there. I want to show up, but like, can I be authentic? But I'm nervous, but I'm this. And like, so then do I share that nervousness? Do I
Ah.
not? What insight would you give you 5, 10 years ago, or somebody that's newer on the path of content creation, facilitation? I want to be more like Nino in
Mm.
how I show up.
Oof. First and foremost,
Or
don't.
not
No,
like,
I know.
let me
Thank
take
you.
it back.
Thank you. Yeah, you knew where I was
What
going
I
with
mean?
that.
I know, I got you, dog.
You're like, you
I
motherfucker.
want to be more honest. I want to be more
Yeah.
authentic. I want to be more me in how I show up. And how
Mm.
do I tap into that if I feel like I haven't cultivated the skills yet
Mm.
to do it?
Yeah.
So there's a dance there.
It's a great point. And thank you. I really appreciate that. And there is truth in that. I feel extremely confident, comfortable, and like I've retained a certain level of mastery regarding my facilitation and experience in guidance and coaching. In that mastery and the skill set, I feel very comfortable letting my guard down wholeheartedly because I rest really comfortably upon my skills.
And you put the reps in.
I put the reps.
You've got a lot of reps.
Yeah, like I can go to the gym, or I can pretty much go to any like workout class and feel extremely comfortable doing it.
And you got the social reps, and you got the facilitator reps, you got the content reps.
So I'm gonna, big shout out to Othership right now. I started working for them about 3 years ago, and this is, to extend their philosophy and how they train a facilitator, because I do think there's actually a lot of value in this. Sorry, you want to teach a class? You better understand the nuances of space holding. Yeah, shout out.
No, for sure.
Shout out the ship. You gotta understand all the beats of that class, all of the emotional moments. You have to understand the language. You have to memorize every word to the T, and then you have to demonstrate it to somebody who's a mentor, a guide, people who've also been trained by the founders at an expert level to understand what makes a performance versus facilitation. And there's an element of both always. Life is always a bit of a performance in of itself, but understanding that difference. And then you have to do it by the book. Beginning. Why? Because you just don't have the reps. That's the truth. Oh, okay, like you want to pretend to make the class your own? You don't even understand how to do the class yet. Put your reps in with structure, with a frame, learn. For some of us, that means, going to university and studying psychology and counseling and reading a lot of literature around psychotherapy, counseling, and that. For another person, that might mean getting a coaching certification from something with integrity, something that, an institution they respect. For another person, that might just mean getting their reps in where they are and asking for help, asking for mentorship. And there's so much grace and humility in just asking and being that novice. I was so lucky that when I started my breathwork facilitation and facilitation journey, coaching journey, that I had a place like Othership, that I had also mentors. Huge shout out, Jacqueline invited me to be on her at Isla Retreats. She invited me to be on one of her incredible retreats, and I got to be a breathwork facilitator, and I got to see mastery, and I got to be humbled at times. Where like when she was firm and yet provided guidance and structure around like, hey, like I know maybe you thought that was great, awesome, but that's not facilitation, right? Because you're just talking at people. You're not actually empowering somebody by telling them about their journey. That's not empowering. It feels like it is. I know you think it is. And just getting feedback consistently is so important. So to answer your question, yeah, if you're new to something, it's good to have a mentor, a master, a guide, a teacher. It's good to have frames or schools of thought, philosophies that have stood the test of time, and to learn from them. And to the person that like you've taken 14 certifications and you're still wondering like, oh, am I good enough? Go do it. Like go out there. Like you know the thing. And now trust that the magic, and I believe this wholeheartedly, the real magic of any skilled facilitator is when they let go of everything they've learned. The same will be said for the greatest athletes on earth. You ever ask, or sure, maybe you're an athlete, or talk to professional athletes, they don't think about basketball when they're playing basketball. They don't think about they just play. Because they have practiced and put the reps into a point where they enter flow state through play. For those that have put the reps in and you've been in the gym of life, go hit the flow state. How? Through presence, through play, through abandoning all the identities you once held so tightly.
So all that being said, what's your take on fake it till you make it?
Ooh, it's like a half. It's like a half. It's like yeah, maybe fake the confidence you might not have.
Okay.
That's okay. It's okay to put on a brave face.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. And be honest about where you actually are on the journey too in the process. I don't really admire a new coach who's never done it in their life going, yeah, I charge $7,000. I go, what? I mean, I love the tenacity. I love the shamelessness of it. There's something brave and amazing, but like there's an absurdity that I don't agree with there. Just like you're not actually experienced enough. Like you actually you might hurt somebody in this space. You're dealing with complex trauma and things that are really sensitive. Um, so faking it and acting like you're a professional and a master when you're not could be very dangerous and could be
Yes.
like fraudulent. But when it comes to like for yourself, like how do you approach yourself? Fake it till you make it. You're gonna act like you're a professional meditator. How? Well, you're gonna meditate every day. You know, I'm a professional. It's an identity shift, right? When people think we need habit shifts, we need identity shifts. In that sense, you're faking it because, of course, there's still that part of you that's, well, let's say, adjusting to this new identity. I'm a meditator. I've only really done it for 2 weeks, but just keep telling yourself you're a meditator. It's gonna help you build the habit.
Yes, internally, not externally.
There we go.
faking.
There we go. Internally fake it, but even that word is just more of like a fake sounds out of integrity. I almost might just want to say like
Yes.
I'd like to say like you're trying on hats. You can take off the hat later, but like, try it on. It might fit well. Might help you. Maybe that's not the best metaphor, but you get what I'm saying. I hope.
I do.
I hope you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I feel what you're saying.
Yeah.
at least I feel it.
It's I'm feeling it. It's in there.
Yeah.
Definitely feeling the third chakra. I love
Yes, from the root for me. So we're in this conversation of like creatives, facilitators,
Mhm.
leaders. What is your take on everybody's a creative?
Ooh, yeah.
Everybody is a leader. What do you think?
With a serendipitous question, as I was asked it this earlier. You know, I think the human mind, as mind does, has a hard time quantifying numbers on Earth. There are 8 billion people on this Earth and growing. And I used to think, like even when making content, I'd be like, oh, they say you got to talk to like who you like yourself when you were younger, your old aspirations, and I always knew in my heart of hearts, like I knew that I was destined for greatness, whatever that meant. And there's a bit of a there's a more humble approach to that I hold now, but at the time it was like I just feel it. I'm onto some greatness. Like I feel it within me. This I'm meant to lead. I'm meant to be a leader. And then as I got older, I completely hated that because I wanted to do drugs and party and I didn't want any responsibility. And then it kind of came back to me and this kind of like, oh, I fell into it. Of course, this thing I once always knew was part of my destiny, and then I ran away from in my youth, and now I've fallen into it in a far more graceful manner. I used to think there's no way that all of us can be leaders. That's impossible. What do you mean? We're all supposed to be leaders? That's crazy. You need people to build out the visions of other people, and that's not even like a hierarchical thing. It's a logical thing. If everybody wants to shape the world, there's no stable world then. Yeah, totally, sure. The thing is, you could have 10 million new leaders emerge on Earth, and there's still billions of people who would be happy, proud, and enthusiastic about bringing those visions or those leaders' collaborative visions to life. Leadership has changed. Firstly, in the past, leadership really was like, I have a vision, you guys follow me, and we do this. I think the leader of our time is the leader that empowers other people to take more decisive action, to have higher levels of agency. And the truth is, leaders are needed. Leaders are kind of just like they kind of help metastasize the energy of a group. You know, if there's 8 people, the leader isn't necessarily the most integral part, actually. Maybe it's some other person whose skills are far more, niche, but the leader is needed. It's a collaborative effort because the leader maybe is the one who has a more clear vision. Maybe they're like the cheerleader of the group. Every leader is going to have their own spunk, their own magic. But I actually don't think I now have come to see that there is no shortage of space for leaders. There are a lot of people. I talk to them. There are a lot of people on this earth, friends of mine, family of mine, who their dream is to find something that exists out there that aligns with them. They don't feel this pressure to create something. They don't feel this drive to do that. They don't feel that. That's not their calling. Thank God. So I think there's space. Maybe the people who listen to this, maybe your energy, maybe my energy is attracting a lot of people who know they're leaders to those. Yeah, you're a leader, and don't think that there's a shortage or there's a saturation in the market. there's so much space for new leadership to arise. Because the new leadership, also the world's shifting, right? We're having a decentralization of power. That was one person leading a bill, like, 100 million. That's crazy. Like, those concepts will die. The old world is falling apart. A president means nothing. They're not your leader. They're just a puppet, perhaps voted, and we'll see. Leaders are emerging within communities. As we return to communitarian values, we need more New Earth leaders than ever before.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up New Earth.
Hmm.
With everything advancing, more information than ever, AI, tech, all the things, removing humanness quite often.
Yeah.
How important is it to return? You mentioned it, but in my vocabulary, I think about it as returning to your humanness. And I wonder, what do you feel as things continue to evolve this way? What do people need to return to?
As we move forward into an age of technological immersion, how do we and how can we return to the humanness within us? Well, Alan Watts had something very important, a lecture about 3.5 hours long. I would encourage anyone to listen to it, called The Material is the Spiritual, where he spoke about what he saw as one of the many traps within Buddhism. Well, within specifically like the new reemergence of Buddhism in his time, the 60s and 70s, where he said that Maya, or world as illusion, doesn't mean that it's not spiritual. That the rejection of the material world, oh, because it's just an illusion, because it doesn't represent the one reality behind it, should be rejected, abandoned, and we should all live ascetic lives. He actually rejected that notion, and he what he saw, that was a failure to recognize the sacredness that lives in the material realm. That actually a return to our humanness and the sanctity of nature, and the return to nature and our raw humanness, was actually a far more spiritual endeavor than the avoidance of being a raw and messy human. And I think that that's where I align myself too, where I feel that when I return to my physical body through movement, through devotion, through food and nurturance, through sex, through play, there is a holiness that lives in everything I do because I treat it as such. When I've at times lived my life in the rejection or avoidance of the material space because of my own internalized shame regarding money or capitalism, or things that I was fighting against, that outer war became an inner war that then led to the rejection of this, of material, of my body, of all of it. So the importance cannot. I think it's highly important for us to return to our humanness, and that in fact I would redefine that the whole spiritual journey is a return to being human without dogmatic and suffocating, constipated ideas about what it means to be a human. And in many ways, so the less involved you are in your mind about who or what you're supposed to be, and the more surrendered you are to your body, to your feelings, to sensory and felt experience, a far better life I will be lived. I can guarantee that.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I see it.
I love how embodied you are, man. It's amazing. I'm going to read out a few quotes of yours.
Oh,
that
shoot.
I've just seen online. Nothing too extensive.
was like,
It's
okay.
going to be good. And I want to know what does this mean
Okay.
to you? Because maybe people see it on your Instagram and they want to understand. I want context.
I have to pay for my content now. Shit.
Just dance through life.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Just dance through life. There are going to be ebbs and flows as we move through life. Dancing in its purest form doesn't actually follow too rigid of a structure. There's a playful element of it. You're going to come to life is hard. Life has suffering. Life has pain. When we dance with life, we soften. When she's pushing us this way, okay, sure, taking us here, and it's like an ecstatic dance, right, where we're moving with the rhythm that maybe someone else is giving to us. Just as when we dance with life, we're less likely to become rigid and tense, because I see dance as a movement of energy, and then you won't break apart. When you're rigid with life, you will break. Bruce Lee said this. You could just say it. Be like water. Because when you're like water, you take the shape of any container you're in. Water is powerful, in that it's not weak because it bends and it's without rigid form. In fact, that is its strength. And I see that in my life because my greatest suffering is when I am tense, seeking control, and clinging to who I think I am. Boy, do I suffer. When I let go of that and I flow and I dance, ooh, I just feel empowered and like I'm in mastery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody should dance more. I agree.
And also, literally
dance,
dancing
yeah.
is so good. Like,
Yeah, the best.
it's trauma work.
Uh-huh.
It's like actually some of my greatest, I've worked through so much shame around my sexuality, around my rejection wounds, abandonment wounds from dancing and from letting myself be seen. It's like, yeah, sometimes I move in a feminine way. It's like, good. Well, then do it and be seen in that and feel the discomfort of that and allow yourself to feel that without shame, without the resistance to it, rather, is a more appropriate way. Yeah.
This bridges into the next thing
Yeah.
beautifully, because at Whole Human, we'd often identify the fragmentation, the disconnection, the isolation in society. And you specifically speak to saying we are in a male loneliness epidemic. And what you just mentioned, which is like being feminine, allowing that expression as a man, I think often attributes to that. But what do you mean by we are inside of a male loneliness epidemic?
This next statement is quite unpopular for many women, and I hope that I hope people listen. I don't believe that we live inside of a patriarchy. A patriarchy is the rule of a father. I believe that we live under the rule of a wounded child, of a wounded boy. It is still masculine in nature, but it is a completely wounded and toxic form of it. When people say the toxic patriarchy, I align with that more. However, that still subtly implies that like we've tried patriarchy or that we're living, and I go, that's not really how a father cares. A father is nurturing. A father is provides structure and grounding and purpose. A father has so many positive benefits, and we ought to not alienate from the masculine, but we have. I think women are so lucky in that women have sisterhood amongst them, and it's so beautiful to witness in my female friends amongst mothers and daughters, and perhaps that's what's kept them, going through the most throughout history, is that they had each other when we didn't have them and when we weren't supporting them as men. And I don't see that boys have that relationship with their own masculine or with their fathers. I think that in some ways we live in like a fatherless generation. We belong to the fatherless society. And in that we have a male loneliness epidemic because the masculine is in fact alienated from himself wholeheartedly. Because a man's and woman's wholeness comes from the integration of the feminine and the masculine. Now, the feminine is lucky insofar as their femininity, while aspects of it have been repressed or twisted, like their sexuality, is often really flourishes amongst its own community, amongst the women. And that's a huge foundation. And their masculinity, albeit there's a wound in it, their wounding isn't from themselves. It's often from an external man, which is again a shame that men have hurt them and created the masculine wound in a woman. Boys live in an interesting thing wherein they are their entire identity is don't be like a woman. Don't be like a woman. Everything about being like a woman is the greatest insult. You're a pussy, or the word pussy, although vagina is literally the giver of life. This is a negative thing. Oh, no boy wants to be called that. Or, oh, you hit like a girl, you do that like a girl. So the boy is wholeheartedly rejecting all of the feminine out there and within himself. And he has no sense of brotherhood, no sense of male initiation, no sense of ritual rites of passage, and no real role models because of the fact that we live in this toxic patriarchy, this wounded boy child that rules us. Like that's the energy that rules our society, and in that I see a loneliness epidemic, wherein because boys can't connect with themselves wholeheartedly because of that disconnection from their own inner feminine, they also really don't even know how to connect to women because they don't have a good relationship with feminine. And then they can't connect with each other because they've made connection gay. Like, what? We've made vulnerability and connection and depth something that, like, ugh, that's for women. oh, there's this quote I think by Robert Bly. Men were given the power. Men were given the power to feel powerful. Women were given the power to feel. And that I see as like the thing. And some men feel powerful, but they can't feel, but they're numb. That's it.
Mhm.
Women have the power to feel. And that's what I think men are just learning to come back to. And it's really, this is not to lower the plight of women. Like in fact, I think there's no denying that women have had a far more oppressive history. It's just kind of to bring compassion and grace unto the masculine. I think that if we want to really build a new earth on any true long-lasting principles or foundation, we wholeheartedly, the men and the women, have to come together and recognize we're not going to get there with a matriarchy. We're not going to get there with a patriarchy. We're going to get there with mom and with dad coming together.
Mm.
And that is controversial breaks my heart. Oh, it breaks my heart that so many women have been abused by their fathers, abandoned by their fathers, that the thought of a father ruling is offensive to them. Oh, and I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so sorry that we did that. And to men who think that, oh, having a woman in power is a good idea, like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry whoever hurt you. That's a shame. And it's a shame that we at times don't understand the value of them coming together. I say all this just to go, like, my philosophy under this is we need both parties to do some ho'oponopono.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you.
for sure. Yes. What is a modern initiatory process or rite of passage? Because you said this, people hear this. How do they do this? How does one have a rite of passage, initiatory process in the modern world?
Not to sound like I'm trying to sell something, but if you come to one of my experiences, in some ways there is a rite of passage. You know, I think I'll reference a gentleman who was just at my retreat. You know, he's had a past, you know, with troubles with the law, with his own demons, his own addictions and stuff. And you know, we were connected through othership. And at the beginning, he was very like, you know, there was a bit of a persona, I think, like a distance to the whole experience, but he was open and willing. And man, everyone there, we all, you know, and he was so open. By the end of the experience, you could see he had dropped the persona, the armor, and he had given himself permission to play again. Ironically, an opportunity to be himself without the performance of who he thinks he has to be as a man. Because he's, you know, a grown up man, he's, you know, jacked and ripped, and he had this hard shell performance of perhaps masculinity. And at the end of it, his masculinity was shining in his compassion, in his open heart, in his playful and boyish nature. There are spaces, I can imagine, that you've created immersive experiences that in some way produce similar rites of passage. But even then, I think we're lacking. It's a one-off experience, but I would love, you know, and if I got to play God for a moment, or God of a society, we would take 16-year-old boys, and you know, this is taken from like Aboriginal and Indigenous cultures, you know, away from the group, and they'd be taken by the shaman or some kind of a few mentors, and they would do hard, rigorous work, a vision quest, you know, maybe taking some psilocybin and sitting with medicine as they dance around a flame, and each of them proclaims something they're letting go of, and creating a playful and yet structured and integrous ritual around the new chapter of life that they're stepping into would in fact act as an initiation into the next level of life, whether that might be from maybe boys should do it when they're reaching their teenage years, and then teenage years have do it again when they're reaching young adulthood, and then young adults when they're stepping into like preparation for fatherhood. At each of these stages, you know, that I can identify in this moment, would have these kind of ritualistic, playful, and rigorous rites that challenge us both in the physical material space and also mental and emotional through vulnerability and through connection, that ultimately teach them they're safe, you're supported, you're allowed to be in your full expression. Life isn't going to always be hard, or sorry, life is often hard, and we have to be able to navigate complexity and difficulty without collapsing into our search for certainty. I don't know if we really have a lot of these spaces. So I know a lot of this is an idea.
Mhm.
I hope, and I hope that perhaps with more things that I do, that I can create things that feel like an initiation. But truly, I wish we could do it for like 16-year-olds. I'm lucky. I was 16 or 17. I was, I guess, having them in my own crazy way. Me and my friends, 2.5, 3 grams of mushrooms at Stanley Park in Vancouver, and we'd go into the forest, and then we'd come back, and then I'm coming back crying, going, guys, I had a conversation with Mother Nature. I feel like I've been ignoring her. And my friends are like, wow, like that's so awesome, bro. And they're like, someone else is like, I just realized I love my girlfriend. I'm like, you do? And we're like hugging each other. I was lucky. I was lucky to have an experience that a lot of young men don't. I felt like I had really loving male friends. We were able to, expand consciousness and get into the wild, go on hikes and have what felt like our personal initiatory rites. But obviously I understand that like the ethics of psychedelic drug use with minors is contested. And I'm not necessarily advocating for that,
Mm.
but I think we need something like this.
Yeah, it makes me think of Francis Weller's work.
With
He
him.
says an initiation is a contained encounter with death,
Oh,
and trauma is an uncontained encounter with death.
love that.
So you just alluded to is through mushrooms, obviously parts die, ego dissolves, things kind of fall away,
Mm,
and you have a encounter, but the containment usually happens with other. You had friends. Self-containment is a bit more challenging, so having community to
mm,
hold that containment. This is what he speaks to. That's simply contained encounter with death. And we have death every given moment of different things, experiences,
mm.
personas. And so containment with death creates initiation.
Ooh,
What are your thoughts on that?
I can't. I love this. I love it. A good life is one lived with 1,000 small deaths. Grief has unfortunately and fortunately played a huge part in my personal journey on towards spirituality, towards self-contemplation, self-inquiry, and death encountering, albeit for me it was uncontained, and so it often led to trauma and a lot of avoidance and bad coping mechanisms. Also was so potent and powerful, and eventually in time when I found container, when I found support, led to the greatest awakenings within me and powerful realizations and energetic transmutations into my own manhood, into my own degree of responsibility. And I've often like honestly, I've often wondered like actually I swear to God, the way that I described my coaching, I said, I'm trying to I had to have many identity crises through trauma, and they were terrible, and I did not cope with them well. Often, I was just lucky that I kept the universe kept catching me and pushing me forward. I, after my journey, at a certain point, I said, "How can I create a loving, safe, and challenging container where we essentially initiate a deaths of identity?" Because fundamentally, all suffering, at least in the spiritual perspective of which I hold quite dearly, is a result from an attachment to an identity, because it's the identity that is suffering. It's not the pain is not the suffering. It's the identity that you've created around the pain. That's the suffering.
Beautifully put. The final question that I have for every guest that comes on is, what does it mean for you to be whole?
Oh, makes me so emotional. Oof, I think really to be whole is like to look at every single part of myself, like every version that I've ever been. And because we just made this point around death. That's true. I don't walk around as my 17-year-old identity. But I actually started to live really incomplete in some ways, unwhole, right? Broken, fragmented, precisely because there was parts of my identity, parts of my life that I felt so shamed by the mistakes that I'd made, through the people I've hurt, through my recklessness and self-absorbed nature, that I completely was like, that's not me. That's not who I am. Mm-mm. And so I let those parts of myself go, and I thought, yeah, I grieve them. They're dead to me. But actually, wholeness has been found in really taking a good look at all of them in the light of grace, compassion, and accountability to not do those things again, and go, you also are enough. You also are okay. You were doing the best you could with what you knew. And I'm so sorry that that's what you knew. And I'm so sorry that that's what you felt, that you thought that was the way to live, to hurt yourself and to hurt other people. And I'm so sorry because the suffering inside of you that has to be present for those patterns to emerge was hurting you too. I'm extending that level of grace to all the different parts of myself. And really, like, that's why when I closed my eyes, I was seeing every version of myself at different ages and looking at them and just going, you're all allowed to be here. And I love all of you. And also I get to make decisions as this guy who is just the integration of everything, as opposed to a new emergent identity that's better than the last. That's not helpful. But rather a presence that invites every part of me to sit at the table. And that's what wholeness feels like to me.
Thank you, Nino.
Thank you, Ryan.
Oh, so good.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really, I can't express it enough. And I mean, if you don't mind me just truly, I really am inspired by the way that you walk through the world. Yeah, I've got to observe you too. And you have every possible excuse to be an asshole, to be cocky, to be oppressive. You have everything. Like, you know what? I'm saying this with
I know what
love.
you mean.
I do it with
I
so
know
much
what you
love.
mean.
And you, in every moment that I see, you invite everyone into your power. And that's a leader, man. Like, everyone around you gets to feel like they're important, like they matter, and like they're valued. And that's how you turn people towards the divine, by inviting them into their own divinity. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much.